Okay, so they're talking about the Yuko's oil um, ruling. I actually don't know the details. I'm not going to look them up, but it was something to do with the World Court ruling against the Russians. Surprise, surprise. And what he's saying is, that it's a kangaroo court. What difference does it make? Chances are that they're just going to send the FSB after the people that won the ruling anyways, and it's all very silly, and if anything, it's counterproductive. Um, but I think he managed to actually stumble upon something here. What he's suggesting here is that this is pointless because Russia will not obey the dictates of American hegemony. But that's exactly what the source of the conflict is. That's exactly why the Americans want Putin gone. It's exactly um, the the issue that is causing all of the conflict. Um, there's lots of other countries in the world that have lots of wealth. There's lots of other countries in the world that might not always agree with what America does. Um, but not even the Chinese um, will outwardly reject the hegemonic control of the institutions that are built by Washington, right? So it's not. I mean, it's. He's kind of getting the causality backwards here. He's suggesting that this ruling is pointless because the Russians aren't going to listen, without realizing that in fact the point of the ruling is to order the Russians, and to try to enforce that hegemony. Um, and the more the Russians reject it, the more retaliation there is. Um, from the American perspective, um, if if the Russians would sort of stand down and do what they're told, and they did what they were told for a while in the 90s, right? If they would go back to doing what they're told, then all of this conflict would cease. And we would have um, a lot of peace in a lot of areas where we currently have war. Um, and this is the basis of the State Department's argument that this is all Russia's fault. Of course, the Russians would respond with, well, we're a sovereign country, we can make our own decisions, we don't have to do what you tell us. The logic of empire says that actually you do have to do what we tell you. And this is the whole um, issue. It's, I think, the point that people miss hugely. The Americans do not view Russia as a competing power. They don't view Russia as outside of its control, right? The Americans view Russia as an insulated province. And I know, to somebody with a broader view of history, that is outrageous. But it's the truth of it. And from their policy perspective, that's the only solution is for them to, accept that hegemony, which they believe they're entitled to. It's a lot of people talk about like a mafia system. It's more of like of a feudal hierarchy, right? Where the Americans see themselves as, well, I was talking about the empire before. It was always a struggle between the emperor in the west and the emperor in the east, and they thought they were, um, thought that one should be subservient to the other, right? Um, it was often the East that demanded that the West bow down. But I mean, this is the closest um, historical parallel to the system that exists. Is this system of papal hegemony where you had this pope and all the countries. I mean, from a legal perspective, in the in the system of feudalism, um, the pope was on top of all of the kings, right? So all of the kings had to pledge allegiance to the pope. Eventually, that broke up, of course, um, but that was the legal system. Um, it's kind of obscured in history, but it's kind of what the Americans kind of want to put in place, right? So the point of these rulings are to dictate terms to the Russians, and the Americans do expect that they will, because they see themselves as their hegemon. They see themselves as above them in a hierarchy that the Russians just don't acknowledge, right? So it was an accidental comment. And I'm taking it. I'm interpreting it in a different context than intended, but it was actually uh, very succinct in that kind of way, and something that deserved a little bit of an elaboration upon.